Jim the Ape want proof. Hello again, humans. It is I, Jim the Ape. And this is the latter half of my two-part mini-series of response videos loosely connected by their addressing of YouTubers such as myself. In both cases, I'm very late to the party, and said videos are dead horses. Today's is so dead, I think it's illegal not to make a response video to it. And to save time, I've decided to do to Steve Shives what he did to the rest of the world, and block him from this video. His questions are stupid anyway, and most of them assume I like second wave feminism. I don't like any wave of feminism. From where I stand, feminism has always been the extremist, ideological weeds growing alongside the flower bed of equal rights advocacy and activism. And when there's no more legal rights to fight for, all you're left with are the weeds. With that being said, let's get into the actual video.
Are you able to understand the irony of responding to the perceived political correctness of the left with exasperated reactionary hypersensitivity of your own?
Even in my most angry rants, I never tell people what they can and cannot say. I'd say there's a big difference between passion and language policing. Guess which one social justice advocates do more often than their opponents?
What is it with you people and skulls?
How many skulls, Davis? Tell us how many skulls you have!
How do you define right-wing?
I don't. I think the whole two-party political system is a false dichotomy. And when someone identifies themselves as right-wing or conservative, I generally take them at their word. Next.
Rather than telling people you disagree with to drink bleach, wouldn't it be more productive for you to have an actual conversation about the issues you feel matter? Or is it just easier to do the bleach thing?
Remember in part 1 when I said something to the effect of, "Oh, so now it's offensive to make a comment about how you want to kill yourself?" Yeah, well, this is the long-awaited return of that idea. Much like Chris Ray Gun, I also have been known to jest about suicide and self-harm in response to unbearable stupidity. And that's what the bleach thing is. Don't believe me? Ask Chris Ray Gun. He practically originated it.
You claim to be proponents of rational, logical, evidence-based argumentation. That's great. That's entirely laudable.
God damn it. Vernaculus already beat me to the punch on the Sherlock Holmes joke. That's what I get for being so damn late to the party on this one. Anyway, go on, Professor Moriarty.
But when I look at your online activity, when I look at, I don't know, for example, your Twitter feed, that's often not what I see. How do you reconcile this claim to be evidence-based and rational and logical against stuff like, "Oh, I was just trolling you," "Oh, I was just shitposting," or TLDR?
Okay, one, it's pronounced teal deer, and he says, "Citation needed." 2, Twitter is a shitty platform for substantive arguments due to its 140 character limit and ban-happy CEO. And last but not least, there's this little phenomenon that exists, I'm not sure if you've heard about it, it's called a sense of humor. Not everyone has one, but there are all kinds of people that do. Stupid people, smart people, average people, even some highly respected academics will occasionally say things with the purpose of making each other laugh and having fun at other people's expense.
No, seriously? What is it with you people and skulls?
Fuck you, skulls are cool.
Are you aware that the ridiculous buzzwords you helped to popularize, like SJW and cuck and regressive, have all lost whatever meaning they once had and only serve now as catch-all insults and pejoratives to derail any meaningful conversation?
You're one to call anything else ridiculous in that toga. But are you aware that the actual important words that are meant to describe legitimate hatred and discrimination that you help to water down, like racist, sexist, misogynist, homophobic, and transphobic, have all lost the meaning they once had, and now only serve as catch-all insults and pejoratives to derail any meaningful conversation. Not to mention the watering down of even more important words that describe actual crimes like sexual harassment, violence, assault, and rape. Hypocrisy, thy name is Rollins.
for the last time, what is it with you people and committing actual literal felonies?
I haven't committed any, nor have I ever listened to the Ralph retort. Next.
In videos and in the comment sections,
Triggered!
anti-feminists often take up the most extreme or the weakest feminist position they can find, or they just straight up misrepresent what the feminist position is. Instead, why not take up the strongest, most robust feminist argument you can find and really challenge yourself?
Okay, first of all, feminists can't even agree on what the feminist position is. Second, like I told Ashley Mardell in part 1, I make direct response videos like this so as to not misrepresent what I'm arguing against. And lastly, the stronger the ideas or the arguments, the more likely I am to agree with them, while the more blatantly retarded the ideas or the arguments, the more fun it is to debunk them with humor.
I am deeply concerned with male addiction rates, suicide rates, and abuse rates.
What do you want, a fucking cookie?
Because I have worked with these issues in the quote-unquote real world. Would you be willing as anti-feminists to put aside your differences with feminists for the greater good of addressing these issues, especially as the kind of solutions needed are not necessarily gendered? And if so, I would actually like you to let me know, because I'm not fucking around or presenting any gotchas here. I actually really think that we could get something done if we work together. So, yeah.
Commissioner Gordon, light the virtue signal. Anyway, it stands to reason that if the problem is gendered, the solution will probably be gendered. But whatever, it doesn't matter if said solution is effective. And like I've said before, I would be willing to work with, protest with, or otherwise join efforts with feminists if there's common ground on which to do so. It's usually feminists that don't want to even talk to men's rights advocates such as myself, much less work with us. They tend to just dismiss us as misogynists.
Why is it that this feminist represents all feminists, but this men's rights activist doesn't represent all men's rights activists?
Whoa, wait, sexism all of a sudden? Ladies and men are different? So we're supposed to punch men and not hit ladies and open doors for men, but not ladies? Fuck you, get out of my face, you tiny piece of shit.
In both cases, it is uncertain that those people are what you have claimed them to be. However, they do exhibit traits that are seen as the epitome of the negative stereotypes each group has about the other. Trigglypuff may not be a feminist, but she behaves like the worst kind. And maybe that guy doesn't go out of his way to advocate for men's human rights. But to you, he's the embodiment of an irrational, ranting and raving MRA. In other words, they may not represent those groups, and they certainly don't represent all members of those groups.
Why am I continually asked to answer for the views of feminists if I agree with feminism's overall aims, but don't agree much with those particular feminists?
Well, when you use a label, people will inevitably lump you in with other people who use that label. That's why I prefer to use terms on a descriptive basis rather than a prescriptive basis, i.e., I advocate for the human rights of men, therefore I am technically a men's rights advocate, rather than I am an MRA and therefore I must believe this and that and I have to feel this way about this thing, etc.
Does that mean that I can ask you to answer for anybody who labels themselves similarly to you, even if you don't agree much?
What are you doing in this very video? What is the fucking title of the video I'm responding to right now? Yeah, it's literally asking people to answer for anybody who labels themselves an anti-SJW. This video is disingenuous as fuck.
If SJWs are bad...
S-Jews! Super Jews, they are really big Jews. They are the super Jews and they're coming for you. Though they dress funny, they'll take all your money, leaving you destitute. They are the super Jews.
Because they spend too much time whining and don't talk about real problems, then why aren't you talking about those problems instead of just whining about the other people over and over and over for literally years? I mean, in the scale of priorities, that's like even lower, right? You know, you've got the real problems, you've got the things that feminists worry about, and then you've got you going, oh, how dare they? Just how dare they have different priorities from me? Why can't they do what I do? Whine about whining forever for a living.
Like I said in part 1, I use the petty complaints and fallacious arguments of feminists and SJWs as a springboard to talk about real issues, particularly men's rights issues. Also, when feminists talk about sexual assault or racism, as you put there in your little text box, they do so in a disingenuous way, often citing faulty studies that are little more than surveys with a heavily biased agenda behind them. They use the results of said studies as if it's the objective statistics on the matter, and they paint the picture that there's this epidemic of violence against women and racist cops killing innocent black people. Meanwhile, the real problems connected with what they're talking about are much more nuanced and far more complicated than simply saying all cops are racist or all men are misogynists. And as a quick side note, congratulations on creating an infinite loop of whining, etc.
Why don't you seem as concerned with actual feminist theory in academia as you are with wrecking people for views?
I am very concerned about so-called academic feminism taking hold in universities and turning them into indoctrination centers. However, there's little more I can do about that than laugh at the stupidity while the world burns around me, metaphorically speaking. I mean, I did sign a petition about it a while back, but there were feminists and anti-feminists alike that saw that as OMG, academic censorship, and opposed it. So I do what I can do, which is express my opinions and try to engage people, entertain people, and inspire thought and conversation about the issues I care about.
You do understand that reading the title of a book or an article or watching the first 15 seconds of a video is not going to give you a deep, nuanced understanding of what that book or article or video is about, right? That being said, how can you expect to understand or critique feminist sources if you don't even attempt to understand what they're trying to say?
I don't critique feminist sauces. I don't trust what would be in them, especially the red ones. Anyway, I don't have much time to read books. Either that or I don't want to. And that goes for both books I would agree with and those I would argue against. Articles are a different story. I read some of those every so often, but most of the time it's videos that I consume the most. And I do watch feminist videos all the way through because I make response videos to them. And I wouldn't be very good at my job, so to speak, if I didn't listen to their full arguments as they present them. So I do. And then I feature said videos, often from beginning to end, in my response videos, spliced together with my rebuttals.
Why is trying and failing to debunk a study into sexual assault the #1 priority for a rational thinker now?
Failing is never a priority, moron. However, debunking faulty studies is pretty high on the list of priorities for a skeptic. That's regardless of what the study is about. But in the case of sexual assault claims, one might be motivated to get to the truth about it so as to quell any paranoia which may result from said faulty study, i.e. making women fear that they could be raped at any minute and telling them that they shouldn't trust anyone with a penis.
One of the major arguments that I see in many of your videos is that it is possible to separate criticism of the religion of Islam from the actual Muslim people. And yet, this line seems to be crossed very often. I see things like raghead or camel fucker.
Hey, they fuck goats, get it right.
Or other things like that in your comment sections. I see people taking very serious shots at Muslims in videos and hangouts, and they don't get called out, at least not that I can see. So my question is this: why should a person of conscience who is concerned about the Muslim people and their community not being harmed or mistreated, why should they believe that you're actually only attempting to look at the ideas and talk about the ideas if you ignore bigotry that's occurring right in front of you?
Okay, quick irrelevant side note, but you are a pain in the ass to transcribe for a script. Do you know that? Because in the future, I'd suggest you stop meandering and get to the fucking point. Speaking of which, my answer to your question here is simple. It's because words are not the same as actions. If in the wake of a terrorist attack, for example, people were beating Muslims or anyone who looks Middle Eastern to death out of some misplaced guilt by association bullshit, I would condemn that. But if people want to make fun of others who believe in and worship a pedophile warlord who's apparently so insecure he'd kill you just for drawing a mocking cartoon of him, that's their First Amendment right, and I can't stop them even if I wanted to.
And in that light, would you be willing to break bread and salt with moderate Muslim people on your videos, have hangouts, invite them to your channels, just in order to build some bridges there and to learn more about what they think and how they feel and what their experience has been, so that information and knowledge can be furthered?
Well, bread and salt doesn't sound like a particularly appetizing meal, but if there are Muslims that want to talk to me, fine, whatever. I don't close off conversations because people identify as things. You know, kind of like feminists that refuse to even talk to someone who identifies as a men's rights advocate.
Do you deny that systemic racism against black people is like a thing in general?
Oh, it's definitely a thing. It's just arguable as to whether or not it's happening currently in the United States on anything even resembling a widespread scale. And I don't believe that it is. Now, there may be a lot of problems with heavily black populated communities in low-income areas having high crime rates and gang violence, and a lot of the times in those areas, cops are a lot more likely to pull over, arrest, or get into altercations with black people. But that doesn't mean it's because of racism, and there are several other factors at play. For example, children who grow up without a father are far more likely to seek that male role model elsewhere, which can lead them to being recruited into a gang. Notice how none of that is directly tied to skin color.
If not, why is it so much more important to you to demonize groups like Black Lives Matter than to actually use your platforms to discuss actual solutions to issues surrounding race and racism?
I spelled out one such issue a moment ago, and now here's one potential solution. Fix the family court system to default to shared custody. Now, obviously, you can't force a person to be a parent, so that wouldn't help situations where the father wants no part of the child's life. But it would help those who do, and it might make the child support payments that they probably shouldn't be forced to pay in the first place actually worth it. And I don't need to demonize Black Lives Matter. Their actions speak far louder than my words ever could.
If you've ever discussed or done a video about black on black crime, when are you going to do a video about white on white crime and what we as white people can do to solve the problems in our community?
I will do a video on, or briefly mention, white on white crime the very moment there is a White Lives Matter movement spreading fear and paranoia to white people about cops just being out to murder them. As soon as dead white people are propped up as saints who were innocently killed by demonically hateful and violent police officers, when in reality, said decedents were in the process of committing a crime and were in fact armed and dangerous when they were gunned down. If a radicalized white supremacist murders 5 police officers during a protest and is hailed as a hero by some on social media, I will make a video about white on white crime the very next day. In the meantime, the problem is that black on black crime is statistically very close to white on white crime, despite black people being a significantly smaller percentage of the population. So I might mention it a few times, especially when people are painting the picture that black people are being unjustly targeted by the police for no reason whatsoever. True, some officers go way over the line, but the numbers don't lie, and not all police shootings are unjustified.
Why is a literal teenager's different definition of racism from you so horrifying that you all have to go, "No! No, we have to stop him! We've got to debunk him now!" Ah!
Because she's not the only one who believes it. Yes, I said she. Deal with it. And not only is it a pervasive redefining of a very important word, but it waters it down to the point of meaninglessness, like I said before. In other words, if by your definition everyone is racist, then no one is.
You often say that you are for equality of opportunity, but if people of color, for instance, have to overcome barriers whites do not, such as discrimination and unequal treatment as are well documented in various studies, then how can the current situation be thought of as equal opportunity in any real way? And why do you consider it racist to discuss these issues?
It's not racist to simply discuss these issues. If anything, it's racist to repeatedly try to use these issues to specifically guilt trip white people for things that they never did just because the people who did those things had a similar skin color to them. And I am for equality of opportunity rather than forcing an equal outcome. But if you want to convince me that there's significant disadvantages for anyone who isn't white, you're going to have to do more than just vaguely allude to various studies. You're going to have to actually produce them.
Do you understand basic English syntax? Like, if I say this cat is pretty, I don't mean that all other cats aren't pretty.
Now, if you'd ended it there, I would have agreed with you. That's a very reasonable point in and of itself. However, you're about to seriously contradict yourself. But before I show that clip, just imagine I said to you, in response to your example, all cats are pretty. See, if you understood basic English syntax, you would hear that statement and realize that the cat in question would be included in all. And therefore, my statement wasn't in disagreement with yours, it only made a broader one to the same effect.
Like, do you really not get why saying all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter is not only racially insensitive, but just patently ridiculous?
I could show you footage of Black Lives Matter protesters chanting for dead cops, or BLM supporters in college talking about how a white person's life isn't worth affirming, but I don't really have to. You literally just said that the statement all lives matter is racially insensitive, which is a stone's throw away from just calling it racist. And if you ask me, I'd say it's anything but ridiculous to refrain from attaching skin color to the concept of life and saying that all people deserve life regardless of their skin color. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand the reasoning behind why people say Black Lives Matter. But for one thing, I think their reasons are misinformed by biased media sources. And for another, Black Lives Matter is more than just a statement. It's a movement. And one that has gone way the fuck off the reservation into crazy town. Riots aren't protests. Destruction of property isn't activism. And killing cops doesn't help anyone.
Isn't it offensive to men to assume that a man could only ever want equality for women and therefore be comfortable with feminism as a whole in order to get laid, and that reduces us to beasts?
Just what the fuck is wrong with being a beast, you speciesist? One of my best online acquaintance/friend people is a beast, and I think you owe him an apology. Anyway, I want equality for women, and I am not a feminist. I am an egalitarian, and granted, I'm also a men's rights advocate, so I believe the most egregious legal inequalities in America are those that negatively affect men and boys. But nonetheless, I want the sexes to be equal under the law. And I never said male feminists only do it to get laid. And I've made it clear in previous videos that I hate the primitive belief that a man's value as a human being is tied to his sexual prowess. But to be fair, I have heard some awful stories about certain male feminists. Like ones that if you cut them open, it makes you cry. But whatever. Everyone has their own reasons for the positions that they hold. I won't let one bad onion stink up the whole bunch.
If you say you're an egalitarian, will you call out the man-hating slurs that you see coming from people within your community? People who use terms like cuck, beta male, faggot, or mangina? All of these things basically distill men down into thinking that the most important thing about them is to be having sex with a woman.
Like I said before, I would agree that judging a person's value based on their sex life is horrible, stupid, primitive, and childish. And I also dislike those terms, which is why I don't use them. But riddle me this, Miss Winters. If those words are such a problem for me and my ilk to answer for, then why do you and yours make up bullshit buzzwords by taking a verb of something something you don't like and replacing the first few letters with man, i.e. mansplaining, man-terrupting, or manspreading. Because that unnecessary gendering of a word to make it sound worse seems pretty fucking man-hating to me.
That's rather offensive. So what are you doing to stop this kind of behavior in your community?
Nothing. Well, like I just said, I don't use them. But I'm not the language police. Other people are free to use whatever words they want to, and whether I like what they say or not, I can't stop them.
What is the number of followers, the number of likes, the number of dislikes, the number of retweets, the number of subscribers, any of those numbers, any of those metrics, what have they got to do with the argument?
Again, nothing. I mean, they let you know that you're not alone in your views, and that even if you're crazy, at least you're in good company. But yeah, it has no effect on the validity of the arguments themselves.
Why is it that you go on and fucking on about safe spaces and trigger warnings and delicate little flowers, but continue to hide behind your cartoon avatars and your childish pseudonyms?
Sorry, I have a sore throat. Anyway, here is a brief list of reasons one might use an avatar, as covered in my video entitled Fedoras and Boxed Wine Bitches About Avatars, which was a response to Top Hats and Champagne on this very subject. Number 1, fear of doxing. Number 2, fear of losing one's job. Number 3, fear of violent retaliation from angry mobs of brainwashed masses. Number 4, protection against swatting. Number 5, lack of fame-hungry narcissism. Number 6, the arguments are more important than the identity of the person making them. Lucky number 7, my favorite, fuck you, I don't need a reason. And finally, because they're doing a character, either for satirical purposes or as an exaggeration of their own views. What do you think, pet human? I don't really have anything to say about this. Back to you, I guess. Oh, you are so fucking useless. Get out of here and go work some more, slave.
Are you willing to publicly acknowledge and admonish the massive amount of hatred, bullying, harassment, and intimidation that a lot of your fans infringe upon people? And I don't mean these tiny disclaimers that you put under the description fold or flash for 2 seconds at the beginning of the video that you know nobody reads. I mean a public and ongoing anti-bullying stance.
See Part 1, the video I did in response to Ashley Mardell. In a nutshell, I don't control my audience. I have said a few times not to do it, but I'm not going to waste time doing it in every single video. And even if I did, the trolls would do what they want to do anyway. And I find it funny that you and your ilk are somewhat hypocritical when it comes to this. I didn't make a video about it when it happened, but Jacob R. Guillory received a shit ton of hate from the audience of Marina Shut Up, she gave herself that name by the way, for a video he did responding to her. Said barrage of hate comments came after Marina made a 15-second video only asking why Jacob Americafied her with his border and going, ugh. Now, you could argue that she incited harassment and bullying, but I won't because she doesn't control her audience either. I'm just saying it's a bit odd how you guys will be all full of self-righteous indignation when people from Bearing's audience leave mean comments, but say nothing when it's one of your own who inspired the trolling. Sounds like a double standard to me.
Why do you find it so hard to believe that feminists are being harassed online?
I don't. But I have 2 quick points to make about that. 1, I think feminists tend to blow things out of proportion, both in calling things harassment that aren't harassment, like simple disagreement, and in suggesting solutions for harassment that I think go too far, like banning people from Twitter, or even trying to charge them with a crime, like Gregory Allen Elliott. And point number 2 is that feminists are, by far, not the only people who get harassed or bullied or trolled on the internet.
Do you understand the key importance of reproducibility and repeatability in scientific research? That simply going to Google Scholar, doing a 30-second search for keywords and pulling out the first paper you find that backs up your stance is not a particularly credible way to do research. That you have to have a much broader overview to read the material, to follow the citations through, to look at the broad brush approach to a particular problem.
Listen, Moriarty, I'm not Sherlock Holmes, nor am I a research scientist. I have shit to do, and I don't have time to bury my head in a library for 12 hours straight before speaking my mind. And if I ever present what I'm saying as anything more than opinions and a layman's understanding of the facts, trust me, I'll take some more time and do some more research. But until then, I only ask that you hold me to a standard proportional to my claims, which I've said repeatedly are more opinion-based than they are well-researched.
You do realise that you're as much of a social justice warrior as those you critique. It's just that you espouse a different form of social justice, a rather less considerate, rather less forgiving, rather less kind form of social justice.
It's cute that you think social justice warriors are considerate, forgiving, and kind. And no, I am not a social justice warrior because I don't give a fuck about societal behaviors on an individual level, as long as they aren't harming anyone. I am a legal rights advocate. I most often advocate for the human rights of men. And if you find that to be offensive or hateful, I have to ask you a simple question. Are men's rights human rights, or are men not human?
If you identify as an egalitarian, then I'm interested in your take on the usefulness of the concept of the original position as laid out by John Rawls in his theory of justice.
I don't know and I don't care because I'm not a pretentious book-blowing faggot. But while we're giving out reading assignments, if you call yourself a feminist, then I'm interested in hearing your take on the economic impact of the decline of men and boys in academia as laid out by Christina Hoff Sommers in The War Against Boys: How Misguided Policies Are Harming Our Young Men. I'll turn in my book report just as soon as you give me yours.
As a supporter, as a proponent of freedom of speech, why do you want to quash academic freedom?
Well, I don't. Kind of. See, it depends greatly on context. For example, I'm fine with schools teaching about different cultures, including religions, and even going into detail about what the followers of those religions believed. I am not, however, okay with public schools teaching religious dogma as fact. Now, if you're referring to Sargon's petition, I feel it's a similar thing. Universities are teaching a secular ideology as if it's fact, and they aren't being held accountable to actually prove that it's fact. So, I'm in favor of suspending what I see as indoctrination courses until the material can be thoroughly and objectively vetted for factual accuracy. Also, doesn't this kind of contradict what you were saying before about having well-researched, rational, logical, evidence-based arguments? Now you're just like, let them teach whatever they want! Like, what? Dude, you're not even an adversary worthy of Inspector Gadget, much less Sherlock Holmes.
Why are you so obsessed with Anita Sarkeesian?
I'm not. But she is a prominent feminist speaker, and many of her arguments are cherry-picked and fallacious as fuck. Also, it is a bit concerning, as a gamer, when a media personality gains a decent following and is talking about how offensive your favorite games are, because then you start to worry that they might be looking to ban, censor, or otherwise interfere with the creative freedom behind the art and media that you enjoy. So yeah, I can see why someone might take issue with Anita, and I have, to a lesser extent myself. Though her glacial production speed that makes me look like mundane Matt probably helps soften my anger with her.
Do you really think you can spend your entire life in a perpetual state of emotional immaturity? Do you actually imagine that you will be able to perpetuate your adolescence for your entire existence? Wait, didn't somebody else ask this one? Wait, I gotta... Ah, fuck.
I'm laughing on the inside. And with that, I'm finally finished! I'm done beating this dead horse! and estimated video length at time of script writing is 48 minutes. Fuck. Well, I'll only know how accurate that is when I edit it, and you can make fun of me in the comments for being so wrong, or for making unbearably long videos like this one. And I won't prolong it too much with the self-promotion here. You pretty much know the drill. Like, subscribe, share, follow me on various social media, support me on Patreon, pretty please. Oh, and one thing I don't usually mention because I don't want to seem needy is fan art or other fan-created content pertaining to my channel. I would fucking love to get fan art or other submissions from you guys, and I would likely use anything you send me in a video, or at least mention it and give you a shout out. Today's example is White Sith Male, who made for me this amazing Photoshop of me and my primary inspiration, the one, the only, Dr. Randomer Cam. I absolutely love it, and I want to give a huge thanks to him. He has a YouTube channel, and he makes Sith Lord videos. Get it? Instead of shitlord. Anyway, check him out, and if you have something you want to send me, or if this inspires you to make something, you can tweet it to me or send it to me by email. Both links are in the description under my links. Again, I would greatly appreciate anything you want to make, because that's how I know my art is really in a good place, when it's inspiring other art. But I think that's enough out of me for now. I'll catch you next time. Stay great, apes.